Alrighty. Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Hello, this is TarotLumination. I think it's Wednesday, 15th of November. It's a great day for going to the thrift stores over here in Las Vegas. They have specials on Wednesday. So there you go. I buy my underwear new. I buy my socks new. I buy my shoes new. But pretty much everything else I get at the thrift store. I've been doing it for decades. That's all I know. Hi, Julie. Where are you, Julie? What part of the world are you from? Let me get my little map. You know how I love my maps. Yeah, I felt that I ought to check in, mostly because I wanted to prove to myself that I'm doing just fine, even though there's some extreme hyper stressful stuff going on out there in planet Earth, our home, our residence. This is where I live right now, over here. I wonder if I could show you. Let me see. You're in North Carolina. Oh, excellent. So over here, there is the Nellis Air Force Base. And it goes through periods of being very active and very quiet. And of course, with the big war going on in Eastern Europe, a lot of training is going on over here, and big jets and cargo tankers, and they're doing a lot of practice fighting for dog fighting and for the the fighter jets, the F-16s and the F-35s and all of that. So it gets very, I'm sort of down. Let's have a look. Where is it? There's a quiet spot over there. So the mountains are over here. Air Force's base is over here. So yeah, I guess I'm sort of somewhere around there. It doesn't look quite right on this map, but anyway. There is sunny Las Vegas. There's the Strip. And a few weeks ago I showed you a little video about this crazy concert with the rock band U2. I was very privileged. I had some VIP tickets to get into the show. And I got to hang out behind the scenes with some of the crew and some of the, the people who make these events happen. It was, I would have to say, spectacular. Some of you know that I'm not used to this place. Las Vegas is very, very strange as far as I'm concerned. It's very unique. I've never seen anything like it. And so they had this Sphere over there, and I think in a few days they're doing this thing with Formula One motor racing, and it's kind of controversial, because it should be very spectacular for the audiences and for the public and the ticket buyers, but it's a big pain in the neck for the workers who actually work in Las Vegas at all the casinos and the hotels. So yeah, excuse me, allergies are really bad for me right now. I had a couple of fairly good days. This morning wasn't too bad, but then this afternoon things got really nasty. So I've taken a load of medication, so I probably sound strange. All of this is messed up. Anyway, North Carolina. When I was a little kid, a little tiny kid, I lived in an apartment in Akron, Ohio, and there was a little girl who lived across the street, and her name was Susie Q, and she came from North Carolina. And I had a big crush on her. Yeah. I don't know if she knows that. Of course, many years later, she would never know. But anyway, let me go over here. I'm not expecting a crowd or anything. This is just, my feeling is that I needed to get something on the record. And I've learned doing my channel that it's very hard for me to do the traditional YouTube stuff where you make recordings and you edit them and you refine them and you put all your glossy bits on them, and then you upload it to the channel, and you have to wait, hours and hours and half a day, and then eventually it becomes visible to the public. And so I gave up, and I mostly do the live streams now, because I just, I wing it. Of course, I get into trouble now and again because there's no editing and there's nothing. Thank you. So, you know that I have been calling it out recently with the eclipses. We had the Libra new moon eclipse about 5 weeks ago. And then we had the Scorpio Taurus full moon eclipse. And now we've just had the Scorpio new moon. And a lot of those aspects all pivoted around relationships. Actually, let me see if I can show you something. Give me a second. Let me go over here. Hold on. Let me go to the stage where I can work a little bit. So this is the Astrodoodle from Monday night. It's already Wednesday. A lot of this is very much the same, except that the moon has moved from over here right into very late Sagittarius. And that makes things a little bit shaky for the United States for various reasons. And in a couple of days, the moon is going to be conjoined with Pluto, and I think we're going to feel a lot of, let's say, fear and instability as a country, as a people, as an entity, since this angle here is extremely critical to the United States of America. This little chart I actually made weeks and weeks and weeks ago in anticipation of the 13th of November, because it was a very extreme day, and that's the Scorpio new moon. We've already moved on a couple of days, so the momentum is picking up. That was actually the last video I made, which was Sunday night. And on this one, of course, it's the same axis here: severe, extreme financial stress for the global world money system. And that's playing out live right now. And of course, the relationships that exist, it just so happens that the North Node axis here is under extreme stress for everybody, for the whole world. Essentially, it's about relationships. And a lot of people, billions of people, are starting to realize that relationships have multiple characteristics, but you can kind of distill them down, like in this situation, what is healthy and what is unhealthy. Because we all have relationships. We have to have relationships. We're social creatures. We can't multiply and reproduce without relationships. But there's toxic relationships and there's healthy relationships. And the whole idea of this piece of astrology here is to wake everybody up and help them to find a way to orient themselves towards healthy relationships. And the way you can most help your relationships is to be your best person for yourself. So it sounds like I'm promoting extreme narcissism, megalomania, egomania, but I'm not. I'm just trying to emphasize this concept where you really have to know yourself, so that when you get into relationship dynamics with yourself and, let's say, your banker or your spouse or your child or your parent or your friends or your business partners or something like that, you have a very well-defined awareness of your own identity, of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And of course, a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people, in fact, most people operate off of default behaviors that are built into our DNA, built into our autonomic nervous system, so that in general, most human beings operate in relationship dynamics that's essentially action, reaction, action, reaction. I scream at you, you scream at me. Yeah, okay? You scream at me, I scream at you. And it escalates and escalates. You're kind to me, I'm kind to you. I'm kind to you, you're kind to me, hopefully. And so on. But that's kind of risky. So in relationships, when you conduct yourself on the understanding that there's you and the other, and then there's an entity that exists between the parties, that's called the relationship itself, that has its own astrological identity. And that's very, very important when it comes to business contracts and marriage and formal relationships between countries and individuals, close friends, close family members, and so on. And what I am witnessing across the world right now is that there is absolute maniacal dysfunction in worldly relationships. And the most obvious examples are the extreme violence that's breaking out all across the world. Mars conjunct Sun, opposing Uranus in Taurus. So it's extremely volatile and violent, basically. The volatility is here, the violence is here. You put it together, it becomes very extreme. A very good example, of course, is what's happening in the Middle East with the thing with Gaza. It's extremely brutal, extremely ugly. Of course, it's all planned out. You know, different parties want different outcomes, and so they behave in certain ways to try and get what they want. I believe that the so-called terrorist people were deliberately provoking the other folks into an extremely hyper-violent reaction, and that's exactly what happened. So I've said what we're seeing is like the lowest form of human behavior, the very, very lowest, most sick, perverse, low-frequency expression of human behavior. And it's all over the world. It's spread. It's like a virus. It's there. It's everywhere. And it's a question of whether it gets activated or lit up. So you might have noticed that. Let me go back over here for a minute. You might have noticed that there's a tremendous amount of stuff going on in the media about, you know, these people versus these people, the terrorists versus the so-called good guys, and they're both sides are guilty of demonic behavior, absolutely evil behavior. And it's kind of inevitable when these seeds are planted over thousands and thousands of years. It just takes one random moment of, like, for example, right now, the way I see it astrologically, I predicted that we would see some extreme violence and extreme volatility in the global financial markets. So, how do you connect the global financial markets to the ugly war in the Middle East and the war in Eastern Europe? Well, oddly enough, again, if you follow the money and you start digging and peeling down the layers, you get through the politics, you get through the religion, you get through the history, you get through the pain, you get through the suffering, and you get through all the tragedies. It comes down to money. Money. Simple. Connect these dots, for example. We now know that the Nord Stream pipeline was sabotaged by the United States in working with the Ukrainians. It worked beautifully. It cut off all the Russian oil and gas, all the Russian gas going to Europe and England. Oh dear, That's a terrible problem. Oh no, oh no. So guess what? All of a sudden the United States is suddenly like getting phone calls. Hey, this is Europe. Hey, listen, man. This is we're in real trouble here. Can you send over ocean loads of natural gas, please? Thank you very much. Oh, and so the American natural gas companies go, oh, sure, we can do that. Industrial scale sabotage. Now, connect the dots a little bit further. You go to the Middle East war, okay? And, I mean, I'm only learning about these things as I go along because I'm curious. I like to see how things work with human nature. I like to look at the grand scale, like I'm kind of doing right now, talking about, global things. But it's the same approach that I use in personal readings, private readings, for one-on-one people. Like, especially a lot of people like to know about relationships. Anyway, so what's going on there with the Middle East? Well, more violence, more blood, more tragedy, but it's on a very much more extreme scale. Well, it's just different, but it's also extremely perverse, extremely violent, dirty, and very, very ugly, and it triggers tremendous emotional response from the good guys and the bad guys and the bad guys and the good guys, because they all blame each other. And what do you get? You get this massive, let's say, it's like an event. It's a spectacle. And it just fills up the airwaves in the media with the horror story of what's going on in the Middle East. And then when you dig further and further, you start to realize, oh my God, this problem has been going on for thousands of years. But in recent times, the big issue is the huge, enormous oil and gas, untapped resources just outside Palestine, right in that southeast edge of the Mediterranean Sea. Hundreds of billions of dollars worth of untapped oil and gas. And of course, it's politically very awkward. Like, who's going to get it? Because someone's going to get it. The big oil companies in the big countries are not going to let that oil just sit in the ground. Nope. So, think about it. It's just like been going on since the 1950s, the 1960s. The United States wants complete command and control of all the oil and gas in the world. And they do that through coercion and manipulation and war, triggering wars, what they call regime change, kill a bunch of leaders, replace them with other leaders that are more suitable for American business, and so on. And so you end up with a situation where what appears to me the real purpose of what's happening in the Middle East is to destroy, completely, utterly destroy any chance for the Palestinian, Islamist, Muslim energy field there, which is called Gaza, and, well, Palestine, and according to international law, because Palestine sits right on those huge oil fields, theoretically they have the rights, and that's a problem for America. That's a huge problem for America. And Israel is a proxy for America in the region. And you may not know, but, well, you probably do know that America has a massive, massive military presence in the Middle East. And it's not because we're trying to be heroes and save everybody from oppression and communism and tyrannical dictators and to alleviate them from poverty and evil. No, it's all about the money and the oil and the gas. I have other maps that show you the concentration of American military, and the biggest concentration in the world by far is the Middle East and West Asia, where you go into the Ishtans and Iran and so on, because there's still enormous amounts of oil and gas out there, untapped. And the Middle East has become so powerful and wealthy and so strong now, it's becoming harder and harder for the United States to keep the control and the order. It's getting dirtier, uglier, and more violent. But again, it's chaos when it comes to global finances. That's just one example. We're just going through history, you know. It goes on and on and on and on. Resource wars. The big oil companies are very awkward when it comes to all these untapped resources, because it always links back to the politics of the country. For example, in Guyana, which is in the northern part, let me get my map. Hold on. Please bear with me. Please bear with me. You probably know that outside Venezuela, let me see if I can. It's difficult to see on this map. It's a little bit tiny, but outside Venezuela, all over here, there's astronomical amounts of oil and gas. But the Venezuelan people, well, the leaders, the communist leaders, refused to let it go to the public market. And because Venezuela is run by a bunch of communist dictatorships, none of the big oil and gas companies are willing to do business. And so Venezuela has collapsed into extreme poverty. The same thing is happening over here in Guyana. Enormous oil and gas fields out here, all untapped. The big oil companies won't go there until the politics change. So it's politics, politics, politics. And what I was just talking about, the story right now is over here. Right at the, I don't know, the map, you probably can't see it too well. Anyway, so this is where all the oil and gas is. We already know that. And so what's happening behind the scenes is that Israel is talking with America about building a new canal that goes through here to bypass the Suez Canal, because the Suez Canal is so compromised by war and China that they're thinking, well, let's just do a whole new thing. And what will happen with this, if these big oil companies and American people get their way, then all this oil and gas will belong to America and Israel, and they'll start shipping it right here to Europe, and they'll put Russia out of business. Ha, 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 ha. That's the point. Massive financial disruption. Because Russia makes huge amounts of its money by sending oil and gas to Europe. It's lost huge amounts of money because the Nord Stream pipeline is cut off. So it all follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. Next thing about the money, now let's go back to the 15th here. Hold on, give me a second. Oh, well, let's go to this one, 13th. So, yeah. Relationships, big money relationships. That huge, extremely hyper-violent opposition axis going on between the Scorpio Sun and Mars in Scorpio in fierce opposition to Uranus in Taurus. Kerblam, kerblam. And Scorpio is one of the signs that rules underground resources, hidden, deeply buried power. Okay? One of the things about Scorpio energy is that it's often associated with extreme power, and it can easily be abused. What do you do with power? Do you do something good with it or something bad with it? Either way, it's still power. And so when you think of the Scorpio energy, you think of gold, silver, lithium, uranium, oil and gas, all these underground resources. And that's in a state of extreme, deep contention right now, because it all revolves around money. These assets are very, very big. They're very, 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 they are the bedrock of the global financial system. Big oil, big gas, that turns into diesel fuel, fertilizer, food, everything. The whole world runs on oil and gas and diesel fuel. Okay? Alternative energies are like this much of the global production. There's hydropower, there's solar, there's wind, there's nuclear. But it's very hard to beat the efficiency of oil and gas, because with the oil and gas, once you get it to where it has to go, you've got the energy right there in front of you. With the electric cars, you can't do that. Anyway, hello, Love Triber. I'm just having a rant to get it out of my system. That's herbal tea. Thank you very much, herbal tea. So, I just wanted to comment on that stuff and how I like to relate it all back to the astrology. Let me go over here to a couple of other things for you. Hold on. All right. So I mentioned that over here about the Israel-Gaza situation. If you dig deep enough, you will find that it all goes down to big oil and gas. And that's why all the American aircraft carriers are there and supporting Israel. And it's a very, very awkward thing, because the current administration, Grandpa Joe, is heavily, heavily compromised, as you know, by China and the Middle East. So it's very, very difficult to execute this war in a way that works smoothly, so that the American big oil companies can just go in and grab the oil. The problem is that Iran, is now got tons of money thanks to Grandpa Joe, and they turn that money into nuclear weapons to kill Americans. Their sole objective is to kill America, kill Americans. Death to America, death to Americans. And the Hamas, the Hezbollah, the other Islamist terror groups, it's all the same thing, and it's all funded by us. It's like, you got to keep the war going. I don't know. You got to justify the war to create a distraction. That's how it seems. It's disgusting. It's like, I don't know. It's borderline evil. But anyway, so I wanted to make that connection. So when I'm talking about the things I'm talking about, I'm describing this axis here. Over here, the 8th house of Scorpio energy, underground resources, oil, gas, gold, silver, lithium, uranium, steel, iron, aluminum, copper, all those huge commodities that are incredibly fundamental to the global economy. Now, interestingly enough, wouldn't you know, that gold has become a very big deal now because of the extreme instability of the global financial system. Okay? Over here, Uranus and Taurus, translation, extreme instability on planet Earth, with the things of this earth, especially things like mountains, volcanoes, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, flood, drought. All of those are happening at extreme levels right now. We're also getting extreme shifts in the magnetic pole, the magnetic north pole of the Earth. There's the North Pole right over here, okay? And the magnetic pole used to be way over here, but it's been drifting for about 10 years, and now it's coming over here, and it's crossing over to here, and it's accelerating rapidly. And it's happening at the same time as a solar maximum, which happens around every 11 years, which is very closely correlated to the orbit of... Guess. Oh, Jupiter. Isn't that interesting? Every time Jupiter has around about a 12-year orbit. And so Jupiter expands everything it touches. So it's like things are getting lifted up to a solar maximum right now, and then everything's going to crash. So it's a great opportunity over the last 10 years, especially with the acceleration of the heating because of the solar maximum. It sounds great if you are a climate freak. So, and that works for the people who use climate as a political tool to manipulate money. Anyway, so that's, again, this axis here. Extreme hyper instability with global resources, the stuff hidden in the ground, which is directly correlated to our banks, our money, our economies, our wealth. And it's under extreme contention right now. And because it's a simple polarity, opposition, it comes down to the relationship between ourselves and planet Earth. Excuse me. Oh dear. So you add this extremely dangerous axis here with this thing here, and you have what we have today happening in the world. Extreme polarity and violence in relationships. In other words, it's what you're seeing across the world is like you're either pro-Israel or you're pro-Palestine. Which one are you? And people get very, very violent about it. Both sides are extremely violent. Both sides, I think more towards the Palestinian side, but it's a very, very heavily coordinated event. I don't think it's a coincidence that the war started October 7th, and within a matter of weeks, massive protests all over the world to make it look like Israel is the demon. It's all designed. All of this is happening by design. Part of it is that the Palestinians, which means basically Iran and the Islamist extremists, they want the oil. And they feel they have a right to it, obviously. So it's a war. Bam, 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 bam. And I wish I had the brain of my brother right now. He's very, very good at these things. But, he or whoever gets control of the resources, especially oil, gas, gold, silver, lithium, uranium, and so on, copper, and so on, they control the markets, which means they control the world. That's basically how it works. America has been very, very lucky in so many ways because we have so much of it naturally ourselves. So we don't really need anything else. But the world needs a lot of what we have. So we've had to integrate with the whole world, and then the Americans got greedy and decided, we can tap into all of this. But people are getting resentful, and so we're building up to this warlike global restructuring. Let me move on. So right now, because things are extremely hyper-tense, there's a very important meeting happening in San Francisco right now here at the Woodbridge Manor Hotel place thingamy, where Mr. Ping, the boss, the dictator of China, meets up with Grandpa Joe, the so-called President of America. And if you watch all the stuff that's going on, they're trying to be polite and everything. But what it really comes down to is that Mr. Ping, the way I see it, this is my personal opinion, Mr. Ping is desperate. He's absolutely desperate because his economy is imploding. And everybody's pulling their money out. All the European, American stuff, they're pulling their money out because they don't want to be associated with the slave camps and all the slavery and the evil that goes on there. And so Mr. Ping is looking around his country thinking, oh my God, our country's imploding. That means I'm going to have to go to war to get it back and do something to get it all back. So right now, my feeling is that he's going to try and, let's say, blackmail Grandpa Joe using, I don't know, I guess you could say diplomatic or political language. But basically what I think he's going to be doing is telling Grandpa Joe, hey, Joe, this is my theory. This is my personal theory. He's basically going to go, hey, Joe, I'm Mr. Ping. You know I'm the boss of you. You're my bitch. I own you. I bought you. I control you. Kneel before me. Kneel before me and kiss my hand. Okay? Let's do it in the bathroom. No one else has to see it, but I need to know. So let's go to the restroom together and do what guys do. Okay? It's a pissing contest. And so I think that's what's going on. And I think Grandpa Joe is going to do this. And he's going to tell the world that, no, we've got everything balanced. Everything's going to be okay. But I think he's also going to say, Mr. Ping, I'm sorry, but we really don't have a lot of money that we can give you anymore. Your ICBC bank just imploded the other day. It sent a massive storm in the global U.S. Treasury markets, and we can't afford that. Your country, I'm pretending I'm Grandpa Joe right now. Your country is imploding, and it's not my fault. It's because you're an evil, nasty dictator, and nobody likes you. Nobody wants to have anything to do with you. Even your own population are trying to get out of your country because they hate your guts. And so it goes on and on. The thing is, both countries are desperate. They're both desperate. They're financially desperate because they have exhausted the model that is used for modern global financial shenanigans. The game is up. The game is over. They've taken it as far as it can possibly go. The only destination from here is a long, slow, controlled, let's call it a controlled demolition. So in other words, if you could take the next, I would say 20 years, and you had a big camera out there in outer space and you could film human activity, that were the kind of stuff we're talking about right now, what we would see is the implosion of the United States and the implosion of China as their economies both implode simultaneously and they go supernova. Each in their own way. I think China is in much, much deeper trouble than we are. And I think Mr. Ping knows that, and I think he's desperate, and that's why he's here, making himself very, very important. And my feeling is that he's actually going out there begging. He's begging, but he's never going to beg officially. He's going to coerce. He's going to subvert. He's going to degrade and humiliate Grandpa Joe into submission and find a compromise. In other words, the compromise might be something like, Joe, you've got to stop America from bleeding us out. We can't take it anymore. He's not going to say that, but he basically has to say that in a hidden language or a secret language to basically get Joe by the neck and say, Joe, you got to stop pulling all your companies and all your money and all the European stuff out of China. You know damn well you can't live without China. Okay, so stop it. Stop it now. Otherwise, and then Grandpa Joe says, well, what are we going to do? I can't stop it. I can't stop it. All the companies are leaving. They don't like you. And then Mr. Ping goes, well, I'm going to take over the world anyway, whether you like it or know it or not. But again, I see that as an act of desperation because there's nothing left to do except to go violent. Desperate people do desperate things. Okay, there you go, back to Israel, Palestine. You go to Ukraine, Russia, America. These people reach a point of desperation, and the only avenue of expression of energy is to go nuclear. Violence, the lowest form of human behavior. But it is part of human behavior. We're the most violent things on earth, besides a volcano or a piece of lightning. But that's part of nature. We do it deliberately. Sometimes you have to be very violent to defend yourself. That's a tricky thing because, anyway, that's a very difficult subject. I don't want to go there. Pardon me. Okay, so I just need to keep ranting here a little bit. Please bear with me. Thank you for anybody who's here, who's listening. I know there's only a couple folks here. Hello, Love Triber. Hello, Julie. Anyway, let me keep going. So, because this place here, America, and this place... Hello, Esther. Good evening. I'm not doing any readings. I'm just doing a rant because I got to get it out of my system. And I feel obliged to correlate all this stuff here on my astrodoodle with what's happening across the world right now. So here we are, United States, here we are, China. They're both, I would say, overexpanded. They've reached the limits of their ability to go any further. Everything after that is fake, fake, fake. And the only outcome is a sort of like an implosion. Now, it doesn't mean everyone's just suddenly going to die, or the whole world is going to be destroyed in one cataclysmic nuclear event. I don't particularly see that. What I see is about a 20-year journey while Pluto goes through Aquarius, where we're going to see revolution, upheaval. That's going to play out in terms of we the people are sick of the tyrants and the despots and the dictators and the maniacal communist leader types. Okay? Here, 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 here. And now, sadly, Canada, sadly, Australia. They're all heavily infected by communism right now. It's very tragic. United States is heavily infected by communism, but we're not dead yet. Luckily, we have a very, very powerful immune system in America that is starting to be activated. But anyway, the implosion of the United States dollar runs in parallel with the implosion of the Chinese yuan. It's a currency war, okay? That is the biggest war on earth right now. It's the currency war between USA and China, and everything else is collateral damage. Everything, all of it. So China is keeping its interest rates very low because they're desperate. It's printing astronomical amounts of money because they're desperate. Mr. Ping is trying to keep the country going with more and more fake money. And the Chinese people are realizing, oh, we're actually being destroyed because of these policies. So inside China right now, there is extreme poverty, and it's getting a lot worse, and it's going to get a lot worse, okay? Desperation. Now, we're going to have a similar thing over here in America. I don't think it's going to be extreme, but we are going to witness increasing poverty, increasing desperation, as the inflation keeps going up and up and up. as the interest rates keep going up and up and up. It's inevitable. There's no other outcome. Luckily, in the United States, we're extremely abundant. We only have 340 million people here with all this wonderful nature and resources. Over here, they have 1.4 billion. There's 5 of them for 1 of us. Okay? And all their country is already heavily degraded with natural resources. It's completely trashed. Their whole country has been trashed. Same thing over here. I don't know what to talk about with this area here because it's so tragic. It's so degraded. It's so sad. Everything here, it's just completely, environmentally trashed. It's very sad. So I just wanted to make a note of that. Inflation, which is still raging, and it's much worse than the talking heads are telling you. Inflation basically means the value of your dollar goes down, 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 down. So you're paying more and more and more and more and more dollars for the same thing. That equals poverty. Okay? Poverty. Slow creeping poverty. I'm sure everyone here is feeling it. So where does that go? You reach a point of civil chaos. You get desperation. So Love Triber told me a story today. She was at a thrift store and there was a robbery actively going on, and somebody broke out through the emergency door at the back, and while the door was open, a lot of the shoppers who were already milling around the store doing their thing decided, you know what? I'm just going to do it too. So there you go. There you go. And it's going to get worse and worse. Now, of course, again, if you follow this channel for a long time, you'll understand a lot of this is deliberate because there is an agenda. There's an agenda. I'm just going to make a quick list of all the names of the people who are trying to implement their agenda. There's this folks here. There's these folks here. There's these folks here. There's, who else? Who are the big bad peoples? The EU over there. There's like an American version of it as well. These are the main culprits that I'm thinking off the top of my head right now. You probably know who they are. And they are called globalists. They're all closely affiliated with places like, I wish I had all this amazing material at hand. If you look at all the global corporations, there's basically like six or seven major global corporations, and they own hundreds or thousands of other sub-corporations which own more sub-corporations, but it all leads back to just a handful of asset owners at the very, 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 very tippity top that own the shares in all these multinational conglomerates. And so if you want to take the trail that way, it leads to places you've probably heard of it. Okay, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Those are the 3 obvious examples. There's more, but these folks, they basically manage trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars worth of stocks in the global multinationals, which own all the sub-corporations, which own all the other sub-corporations. So if you buy a bag of potato chips with this brand, it actually is owned by this company, which is owned by that company, which is owned by that company, and it all traces back to here, here, and here. All these people are colluding together to create their, what's it called now, Agenda 2030. The next one is, the new one agenda is called 50 and 5. But they're all basically the same thing. They create these terrifying stories about how the world is going to fall apart. And we are here to save you. Nobody elected us. We have appointed ourselves as the masters of the universe. So this is turning into a massive communist, basically a dictatorship. It's happening right now as we speak. All of these folks are colluding. They all work as one single organism, including these folks. And the whole idea is to put everything under the command and control of these folks. And guess what the enemy number one is? You. Your sovereign self. This is enemy number one. So they have to destroy the sovereign self. They've already done that in China. It's almost impossible to have any kind of sense of ownership of your own life because everything is stripped away from you by the system. So they have nothing. Hundreds of millions of people in abject, desperate poverty, and whatever wealth there is, it just gets sucked up by the CCP, which spends it all on the military. I know, it's just the same thing that they do with North Korea and Iran and Russia. Same model. It's the same business model. And in fact, you've probably heard of this fellow up here, World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. He believes that the ultimate business model for global world domination and Agenda 2030 is an exact replica of the CCP. He worships the CCP. They worship evil. They're trying to impose evil. They're trying to impose their agenda onto Earth so that you do not have your identity. You are trapped in a prison camp called planet Earth. And you are farmed. So you could look at it that way. The inflation is deliberate. They don't want to actually kill the cow. If you know about my little book, I talk about debt cows. They can't function. These nasty people here, they cannot function without active, live debt cows that produce the milk that they need for themselves to stay alive. They like power, money, and control in unlimited quantities. The more they have, the more they want. So they can't actually kill the debt cows or the slave camps, but they can milk it as far as they can, which is what they're doing right now. They're pushing it as far as they can. So, like today in America, when I was a little kid, I was extremely fortunate. I had a dad who had a job, and he took care of his family, his wife, and his 3 little kids. And we had a life. It's very, very hard to do that now. A lot of people, especially young people, in order to get into property and owning a home and stuff, you have to have 2 incomes working very, very hard, plus side gigs, just to get enough money to get a deposit. And even then, you'll cripple yourself financially for the next 30 years if you actually do try to buy a house. So you have to be very careful. So they've taken it to the limit. In other words, China has taken it to the limit, America's taken it to the limit, which means effectively the whole world has been pushed to the limit. And there will be a global financial implosion of some kind, but it'll happen like a slow motion train wreck. It depends where you are in the world. How does that desperation play out? In the United States, there could be civil chaos, where you have, let's say, very, very conservative people who own property, own their land, own their house, own their cars, and have a high degree of ownership of themselves. Things like private property, and they respect the Constitution. They love America and they respect the Constitution. Those sort of folks are enemy number one. They are the enemy number one. That's the problem with the United States. That's why China is focusing so hard on the United States, and the rest of the world is, all the demonic leaders are trying to destroy the United States from the inside out so that they can get rid of the American constitutionalists. I'm one of them. I'm enemy number one. So, yeah, I've outed myself on YouTube, so what? I already talked about this with the Nord Stream sabotage, the pipeline, the Ukraine thing, and how it all links back to big oil, Middle East, Israel, big oil, big oil, big oil. One thing that just happened this evening, just before I went live, is that hold on. Excuse me. There's a new Speaker of the House in Washington here in America. His name is Mike Johnson. He's pretty hardcore conservative, very, very much like a common sense person, but he's under a lot of pressure to, bring some kind of financial stability and order to America. It's impossible right now. He doesn't stand a chance. And so his latest budget plan was recently accepted, and it just got shut down in the last few hours. It just got shut down because Mike Johnson basically worked out a sort of a compromise deal with Washington in order to what they do a continuing resolution. In other words, we're going to break up the budget, and we're going to break it up and do it through line items so that we can figure out how we're going to run this country and pay for everything as we go. And so it got blocked and shut down because to get the deal done, Mr. Johnson had to hold back on some of the common sense things that you would have in a budget. So in other words, basically it's same old in Washington. Everything is ground to a halt. And the reason it got shut down is because there are 8 hardcore extreme Republicans that refuse to let this fake budget go through. Because they want the hardcore. There's a small number of Republicans that are very hardcore, and they want to put a stop to all the perversion and the sickness in Washington. And one way to do that is shut down the faucet of money. It's a faucet because money is what keeps it all going. So they're trying to shut it down and basically, burn it all down. Burn down Washington. Burn it all out. Starve Washington of the money. So nobody knows what's going to happen next, but apparently there is a deadline. According to what I've heard, it's in 2 days from now, there has to be a final agreement. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Oh boy. So, there you go. I just wanted to get that rant out of me. That's the stuff I wanted to share. There's so much more I'd like to. What I've been trying to do is correlate what happens on the global scale with what I see in the astrology. And pretty much what I see months ago. I mean, if I wanted to take more time, if I had more time to do things the way I could indulge myself, I could do lots of different predictions, of course, all sorts of different predictions depending on the astrology. Because I see strong correlations. And so I just call it out. Anyway, so I hope you're all doing well, at least as well as you can. You got to protect your money, protect your privacy. You got to protect yourself, because a lot of it is heavily, heavily at risk right now. The American dollar is in a very awkward position. Jerome Powell has made unprecedented increases in the interest rates to stop the to try and stop the inflation. And it's not really working. Why is it not working? It's because inflation rate is up here like 20, I see it as around 20 to 23, 24%, somewhere in there. And so to knock it down, you have to have interest rates that correlate equally. In other words, to square things up financially, if you're going to be really, really true, then you have to factor in the amount of risk when it comes to borrowing, because our whole economy is based on debt. Everything is based on debt. And so after 20 years, roughly 18 years roughly, of very, very low interest rates and printing a lot of money, that makes everybody feel good. And a lot of that wealth gets transferred and sucked. If you follow what the money does and how it actually works, you can see that the wealth gets ultimately, the wealth that was down here with we the people gets sucked out and extracted up to the top. In other words, the big five, the big stockholders. And they get more and more power, more and more money, and then they institute more and more rules and conditions. Well, I'm the boss, I'm the leader now, and because I've done so well, I'm going to quadruple my salary and I'm going to cut the wages of my workers because I can. And so there's an extreme hyper disparity between the rich and the poor. And it's so bad that it's starting to piss off a lot of people. And it's getting to the point where it's kind of desperate. So there's Jerome Powell. They had an orgy, literally, it's an orgy of low interest rates and printing a lot of money. And that's great for the people who can adjust the interest rates and print the money and collect the benefits. In other words, the people at the very, very, very tippity top of the financial infrastructure, the banks, and so on. JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, all of that stuff, all the big Black Rocks, the Vanguards, they benefited astronomically at the expense of we the people. And we the people are still too dumb to understand it and figure it out and do something about it. And so I wish people would, I don't know, I would say take more ownership of their lives, their money, their wealth, their finance, how all that stuff works. So anyway, the orgy is over. Like typically what happens is with an orgy of any kind, people get very, very sick at the end of it. When it reaches its plateau where you can't go any further, people, it just becomes grotesque. And that's where we are right now. And so how do you dial it down? Well, the easiest way to dial it down is to stop printing the money and simultaneously jack up the interest rates. So that puts the brakes on. It stops the orgy. But the problem is the people who suffer are we the people down here. That's where the poverty is felt. Like in a very pure state, if you could get rid of the Federal Reserve banking system, in a very pure state, the banks and the markets would operate in a free market capitalist system where the price of something is highly correlated to the value of something. Just bear with me. In a healthy market, value is represented by the price of something. In a very sick market where we have right now, the value is not represented by the price. In other words, look at housing. A house that 10, 15, 20 years ago was priced at $180,000 or $200,000 or is now at $450,000 to $500,000. In other words, the higher price indicates less and less value, because if you want to get into that, you have to spend more and more and more and more and more and more units of dollars of currency to get the same house. So it translates into poverty. And so the numbers are extremely distorted. It got very bad in 2007, and it's getting very, very bad right now. It's reached a kind of an extremity. It's actually kind of frightening. For me, it's kind of frightening to watch. And so right now, there's Jerome. You can see what's happened. He's raised interest rates from like 1, 1.5 to 2, and he's now up at like whatever it is, 5, 6. I can't remember what it is, but it's much, much higher. And that's all happened in about 9 months. That is catastrophic for a lot of people. It's affecting the housing market and the automobile market especially. It's affecting the price of gasoline and the price of food. So we're going to feel it. Everybody in America is feeling it. Everybody in the world is feeling it, because what Jerome Powell does and what Janet Yellen does affects the whole world. It's not just America. The problem is that they've printed so much money at so little interest rates. The distortion is so extreme between financial reality and financial fiction, you can't really correlate them anymore. To actually correlate and get back to reality so that price represents value, you would have to raise interest rates up to 15, 17, 18%. And you'd have to hold them there for probably a few years. And then you'd have to stop printing money. How does that feel? That equals extreme hyper poverty and pain for we the people. The reason they have to raise the interest rate so high is because you have to have a truthful representation of the risk involved in borrowing. When the banks and Federal Reserve lend out astronomical amounts of money under ridiculous terms, it's bound to implode at some point, and that's what's happening. That's why bankruptcies across America are going through the roof. That's why the commercial real estate markets are imploding. That's why the American housing market has completely ground to a halt. The markets are completely paralyzed because they've been used to 20 years of an orgy, small interest, and lots of printing. And that's coming to an end. Jerome Powell is in a very difficult position. He can't just flip it to reality like that, because everything will collapse. The debt cows will die. So I feel we're going to go through about another 20 years of interest rates that have to get high and have to get higher and higher. And people are going to have to get used to it. Where it's difficult is for the generation that was used to extremely fast, easy money at low interest rates, suddenly being faced with much harder ways to get hold of money and much harder to pay it all back. And with a crushed economy, it's like an implosion. There's no other avenue. Everything's bound to implode. It's just a question of how quickly. And so Jerome and Janet and Grandpa Joe, they're all trying to figure that out right now, along with Jamie Dimon and all the Black Rocks and the Vanguards of this world. And it's very difficult because they're used to living in a state of permanent orgy, and it's coming to an end. What do we do? So, anyway, I'm not a financial advisor or anything. In a way, I have a kind of an oddball existence because I don't have any debt. I don't have any things of any great value. And so I have, in some ways, a sense of like a bit of freedom. But for when I look around where I live and how people live, all of them they're up to their eyeballs with mortgages and car payments, college loans and credit cards, and that's how they live, perpetual debt. So for every dollar that they earn, they have to pay back that much for the rest of their lives. What does that equal? Poverty. I live a very different life. I live within my cash flow. And it's a very different way to live. It's a different feeling. In other words, if you don't have the money, you don't do it. You don't have it. You don't buy it. You don't own it. And then you have to adapt accordingly. Like, well, wait a minute. How am I going to get by without this or this or this or this? It's tricky. Yes, I remember. It goes in waves and cycles. This is not a financial channel, but when I look at the astrology, money is the number one issue. Big, 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 big money. And how it's all, what is money? Money's a belief system. I'm very interested in something called Hex. It's a cryptocurrency. It's like enemy number one. It is the enemy number one to the global financial system and to the crypto world. And it's very hard to do anything about it. It's very hard to stop it. But it is what it is. And I'm still very new at these things. I'm trying to learn. But I see it as the germination of a new financial system, which will give people the chance for sovereign wealth, as opposed to being a debt cow on a debt farm. Boy, oh boy. All these links, okay. So, in some ways, I feel kind of sad for humanity for getting to this point where there is so much knowledge, information, communication, abundance. But at the same time, there's so much tragedy and pain and sickness, and it doesn't have to be that way. There are small populations of people, let me think, how could I say this? Like common sense is the enemy. The people with whom I relate, where I feel a sense of resonance in the United States, would be labeled as right-wing extremists. But I don't see it that way. I just see it as somebody with common sense. And it makes it very, very difficult because there's so much pressure to comply with all these social agendas that don't make any sense to me personally. I'm just trying to be polite. And so I usually just shut up, or I remove myself from anything or anyone that resonates with those behaviors, attitudes, expectations that seem absurd to me. And I try to hang out and correlate with people that I feel have some common sense. And that's about the best that I can do. And then whatever I learn, I try to share it with people here. Just one more thing about interest rates, because somebody said like, interest rates were super high. Yeah. One of the thing about interest rates is that in the system that we have where people borrow money, where everything is done through the creation of debt, interest rates are theoretically supposed to represent a measure of the risk involved in the debt. In other words, in debt, there's a borrower and there is a lender. When a lender lends money to a borrower, when interest rates are super low and there's astronomical printing of money, and where the lender does very little due diligence on the borrower, the lender lends out huge amounts of money. The borrower thinks, oh, I'm rich, I'm going to do this, I'm going to buy a house, buy a car and everything based on their job or whatever. And then something bad happens, they don't have a job, or inflation happens, or whatever, and all of a sudden that loan, that relationship between borrower and lender collapses. And so in a healthy market, if I was a lender and somebody was coming to me and wanted to borrow a pile of money, I would ask them, well, who are you? What do you do? Do you have any collateral to back it up in case things go really bad and we have to cash out and everything? Do you have a house that I can take? Do you have a car that I can take? Do you have gold, silver, anything that I can take to pay back the loan in case it goes bad? And if the other person says, no, I got my day job. Well, back in more realistic times, the lender would say, well, okay, well, I would be willing to lend you this much money at this interest rate of 10, 11, 12, 13%. Because it's a high-risk loan. You don't have anything except your day job. What happens if you get sick or you get fired? Well, in the last 20 years or so, nobody cared about that. The banks didn't care. They would much rather pump up the lending and the borrowing. And if people fall apart, they fall apart because they're pumping it up and growing it so much. It's like a weed that they still do okay on the existing loans. But a lot of the loans are known to be, they're going to implode. And so the thing is, the difference between the banks and the Federal Reserve markets, the Federal Reserve Bank and all the main retail banks, in other words, the Federal Reserve, JP Morgan, Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, US Bank, all the big ones, they do things, loans at like, 4, 5, 7, 8%. Now here's the difference. With a credit card company like Visa and MasterCard and Discover, they're much more honest and much more realistic. They basically say that the reality is we're going to just lend you money because you're you and you want it and you need it. We know that you're desperate. And in order to compensate, we're going to charge you interest rates that are actually representative of the huge risk that we take to lend you this money. So if you look at the very, very fine print of your agreement, you'll realize that we're charging you 20, 25, 30, 35% interest rate. So every dollar that you borrow, you have to pay back $1.30, and we want it now. That's a recipe for disaster. But people don't get it. People don't understand. Anyway. But that's at least Visa, MasterCard, and Discover, they're being honest and realistic. Lending out money to anybody is extremely risky. Therefore, we need to charge extremely high interest rates to try and get as much back as fast as possible in case everything falls apart. And that happens on a very frequent basis. Everybody's chatting here about money, money, money. It's me. I started it all. I don't want to get people all scared and stuff. The world is still here. It's still going around. There's a lot of people who just don't care about anything I just talked about. They're not interested. They don't want to know. They're oblivious. So long as they have, their food, their shelter, and their friends, and their Netflix, and everything's fine. You know, oh, gasoline more, food's more. Oops, I have to get another job. I have to get 2 jobs. I have to get 3 jobs. I have to get 4 jobs. According to Grandpa Joe, that's fine. That's the equivalent of an economy doing really well. To me, that's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to stop the video now and wish you all a good night. Thank you for hanging out with me. It really makes me feel like I have a few friends out there. Okay? So take care.